Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Fire comes out from Mongpo Than's arm, shouted the excited villager who ran through the streets of Pegu in the winter of 1909-1910. Lightning will strike those who do not believe, and tigers will devour them. The sleeve of his jacket had indeed caught fire from a lit cheroot, which he carelessly stuffed into one of his pockets. But signs the villager was to be Myanmar's new king kept mounting. A girl's silk handkerchief was carried away by a kite, it was said, and an old magical ring was found. A white elephant was sighted, and the Shweyina pagoda was miraculously gilded. Later that year, historian S.R. Ashton wrote, hundreds of insurgents, armed with swords and a single crude firearm, marched against British colonial forces in the province of Sagaing along the border with India. The rebellion, backed by local monks, was brutally crushed by police drawn from across the border. The colonial authorities tried to tame their restive colony by recruiting immigrants from India, creating a new elite that controlled land, capital, and administration. The policy engendered deep racial bitterness that still runs through independent Myanmar. To be Burmese means to be Buddhist, one independence movement slogan went. Ethnic Bamar national leaders in colonial Myanmar, scholar Matthew Bowser records, thought it was more important to free their country from the kalar, a derogatory word meaning black, used interchangeably for Indians and Muslims, than evicting the colonizer. The history of Myanmar is the history of a succession of revolutions and wars in which strange changes come about. G.J.S. Hodgkinson, the commissioner of the Pegu division, observed in 1888. The wheel of destiny is indeed turning, and this time around, the guardians of Bamar ethnic nationalism are looking to India and Indians for salvation. Faced with an increasingly successful insurgent campaign, the country's all-powerful Tatmadaw, or army, has been desperately seeking help from New Delhi. Last week, the Tatmadaw rolled out the red carpet for an Indian Army delegation, led by the Military Intelligence Directorate's Major General Charanjit Singh Devgan. And even as Myanmar's Air Force has continued to bomb rebel-held villages, killing civilians along the border with India, Air Vice Marshal Ichetra Eyappa Kottappa was in Naypyidaw for talks. To influential sections of New Delhi's foreign policy establishment, the Myanmar military seems like a natural partner. For one, the Tatmadaw's long-standing superpower sponsor China has now deepened its ties with the insurgents fighting the regime. Like Hindu nationalists, moreover, the generals see themselves as being besieged by jihadism and ethnic minorities, often linked to the church. Ever since it seized power in 2021, the Tatmadaw has marketed itself as a defender of the Buddhist state against assault by Islam and the West alike. Far-right monks like Ashin Nyanisara and Ashin Chekinda, who supported the coup, gained patronage from the generals. The leaders of pro-military religious orders, commentator Ong Zhao writes, began to be seen on the streets of Yangon in fancy Mercedes-Benz and Bentleys, drawing derisions from an increasingly impoverished population. Fearful of alienating its core ethnic Bamar supporters, the government of former Prime Minister Aung San Suu Kyi had been reluctant to act against Viratu. Even though Viratu was banned from preaching in 2017 for a year by the state-run council that regulates all religious activity in Myanmar, he freely toured the country after the anti-Rohingya violence broke out. In one speech, he called for Muslims crazy dogs that are, I quote, breeding so fast, stealing our women, raping them, and would like to occupy our country. The monk was charged with sedition in the summer of 2019 after claiming the Prime Minister was sleeping with a foreigner. Surrendering to the authorities just before the November 2019 elections. Like Viratu, the monk U Warthawa has played a key role in mobilizing on the military side, even setting up pro-junta militias drawn from the ranks of the military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party. As the civil war in Myanmar has escalated and the military has come to sustain catastrophic losses, militia like these have become increasingly important for the survival of the junta. They've waged a brutal scorched earth campaign against opposition-held villages and communities. According to Aung Zaw, the regime's favorites include the month U Kovida, known for his astrological forecasts, and for allegedly urging soldiers to shoot protesters in the head. Fearing the influence of the Buddhist clergy over the popular imagination, the cause of multiple colonial-era rebellions, the military moved to contain their influence after staging the first coup in 1962. In 1980, journalist and scholar Bertel Lintner writes, the General Ne Win's regime created the Sangha Mahanayaka Committee, the state body which regulates the activities of the country's estimated 1 lakh monks. The monks were now to carry government registration cards, and there were substantial theological changes. For example, defrocked monks were liable for prosecution in civilian courts, not ecclesiastical tribunes. The effort to control the clergy, historian Michael Charney notes, was not entirely successful. Large sections of the clergy played a key role, together with students, in sustaining the protests which eventually overthrew military rule in 2007. Late in 2001, Viratu emerged in opposition to the pro-democracy monks, spearheading a new movement called 969, so named for the number of special attributes and teachings of the Buddha, and a kind of riposte to the 786 number used in Islamic cultures. Together with his fellow cleric Ashin Vimala, Viratu alleged there is a Muslim plot to marry and convert Buddhist women before taking over the country. Yes, what some people call love jihad in India. Furious over Viratu's less than disciplined communal agitprop, which led violence to erupt across Rakhine, the Sangha Council banned 969 in 2013. The organization was folded into a new, more structured group called MaBaTha to carry forward its demands for race laws which restricted conversions and interfaith marriage. Even though the National League for Democracy's election victory in 2017 proved a reverse to MaBaTha, researchers Amara Thiha and Marty Nielsen observed that the Buddhist chauvinist ideas had taken deep hold among numbers of monks who believed that Buddhism was facing an existential threat from external forces. Islam is one part of this perceived threat, the scholars write, but so too is secularization, modernization, and democracy. The resentments of the clergy were fueled by the growing power of civil society, underpinned by the emergence of influential, often foreign-funded non-governmental organizations. These NGOs, you see, undermined the traditional influence monasteries and monks had obtained as providers of charity in rural communities. For the Buddhist nationalist clergy, the Tatmadaw, or Myanmar's armed forces, were a kind of incarnation of the country's pre-colonial kings, upholders of the sovereignty of its territory, the protectors of the Bamar race, and defenders of what used to be the state religion, that is Buddhism. The political scientists Isan Yilmaz and Nicholas Morrison note that movements of the religious right in both Sri Lanka and Myanmar, which were once intensely hostile to the Indian diaspora in those countries and India's preeminence in the region, are now beginning to see Hindu nationalism as an ally. Even Nepal's communist Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal has sought to manipulate India's domestic politics. He's been making high-profile temple visits and advocating for Sanskrit education. Like Islamist movements in Pakistan and Bangladesh, these regional forces are seeking to draw new civilizational frontiers to prop up their influence. Even though the idea might seem attractive to some in India, letting faith drive foreign policy would almost certainly prove disastrous. India's key allies in the region, after all, include Muslim majority countries in the Persian Gulf, as well as states like Indonesia and Malaysia. India needs to remain focused on its national interests, not serve the ethnic religious agenda of fanatics next door. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.